Good evening, everybody. Warm welcome to those attending. Welcome back after the summer. Hope you all did manage to get a break at some point. And also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Property, Highways and Transport Select Committee. My name is Councillor Keith Burrows and I'll be chairing this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room for those in the room, and also accessible on YouTube underneath the actual broadcast. Just some housekeeping rules for those that are in the room. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to designated meeting points. And for those in the room as well, please switch off any mobile devices or switch them to silent before the meeting starts. Also, for those watching via YouTube, if you're so minded, you can complete one of our residents' feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. So moving on to the first point on the agenda, and to Steve for apologies, please.
So this evening we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Chapman. He's unfortunately feeling unwell, so he's given his apologies for this meeting.
Thank you. And as I usually do before any of our meetings, those that have been on the committee some time, we will go around the room. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, including officers, so that those watching at home know exactly who are actually in the room. As I said, I'm Councillor Keith Burrows and I'm Chairman of the committee.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Steve Tucker, I am the Vice Chairman.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Darren Davies.
Good evening, Councillor Elizabeth Garlick.
Good evening, Chris Moe, Assistant Director of Financial Management.
Good evening, Andy Goodwin, Head of Strategic Finance.
Good evening, Councillor Kamalpreet Kaur.
Good evening, Councillor Peter Money.
Evening all, I'm Steve Clark, the Democratic Services Officer for this committee.
Thank you all. Also, when you are speaking, if I can ask you, turn your microphone on. Once you've finished, please make sure it goes off so that the camera picks up the next speaker. Are there any declarations of interest in any of the matters before us this evening? None? Okay, thank you. Moving on to receive the minutes of the previous meeting. 11th July 2023, seems ages ago now. In the usual, I will go through each page. If you do have any amendments or any comments, please indicate. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, are we happy to, Councillor Money?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on page 1 and 2 on the Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre, just that we did raise concerns to the officers at the time about the difficult economic environment and how it was tracking. And obviously over the summer what's happened is the Buckingham Group have gone into liquidation. And just that we raised concerns, and I think it should be noted, because we were told that everything was well.
I think what we were told at the time was that from the way it was being tracked at that moment in time, things were still on track. I think that's what the officer said. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, so essentially comments from the committee are on the accuracy of the meeting that happened. So if there's any inaccuracies in there, then those can be amended.
I think we know that there's probably going to be something at full council to do with this. I don't think we're really here to debate the ins and outs of the contract now, but your point is taken in what you say, and Steve has made a note of that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, agree the minutes? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. But before that, I would confirm that all of our business tonight is in part 1. We have nothing marked in part 2, so everything is in public. So agenda item 5 is 2024-25 budget planning. It seems we've only just done 23-24, and here we are moving on straight away. Now, obviously, this first opportunity for us as a select committee to discuss the current stage and development of the budget planning work. The recommendation is there, which we'll come to in a second, but I'll hand over to officers just to run us through very quickly the processes for the setting of the budget 24-25. Then I'll open up to councillors for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as you mentioned, this is the first appearance at the Select Committee for the new budget cycle, where we will be updating the committee on the current challenges and the work underway to prepare for the consultation budget to be presented to December Cabinet. We will then come back to this committee in January 2024 to discuss the position presented in the consultation budget and to present specific proposals within the remit of this committee for consideration. The feedback from this committee will then be included in the budget report, which will be presented to February Cabinet, where Cabinet will be asked to approve the budget proposals to full council. So I won't be running through the whole report this evening, but I will provide the headlines in terms of the council's in-year monitoring position and set out the context of the council's approved budget strategy. So for 23-24, the council currently reporting a net underspend of 23k, with the services within the remit of this committee forecast to overspend by 51k, with this overspend being driven by a slight pressure on recharge income against capital schemes. Within these services, there are £1.9 million worth of savings to be delivered in 23-24, with 303k being recorded as Amber 2, which relate to the reduction in Civic Centre operating costs, and a further 736k at Amber 1, which is primarily linked to fees and charges income, whilst the impact of uplifts are assessed through the monitoring process. So in terms of the MTFF, so in February 2023, the council's saving requirement to 27-28 was estimated to be 55.4 million, with the single largest factor being driven by exceptional inflation, which added £60 million to the budget gap. Within the remit of this committee, there are no exceptional inflation items, but there's £3.5 million worth of inflation, with the forecast pay award making up £1.3 million of this sum, and £2.2 million driven by contract expenditure. Service pressures are forecast to add £23 million, predominantly from the impact of demographic growth, with no service pressure in the MTFF falling within the remit of this committee. And finally, corporate items add just under £12 million, with £6.5 million of this being driven by the council's borrowing requirement to fund the capital programme, and £4.1 million from the TfL concessionary fares levy as a result of demand returning to pre-pandemic levels, with this element of the budget gap sitting outside of this committee. So over the next few months in the build-up to December Cabinet, we will continue to work on assessing the budget gap, and with inflation remaining stubbornly high and demand pressures on council services linked to the cost of living crisis. Alongside this, we will also be exploring ways to reduce the council's expenditure by driving efficiency gains whilst protecting frontline services, using the council's transformation process to formulate budget proposals that will be presented back to this committee in January. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments? Councillor Tugwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not really a question, it's an observation, how quickly we've come around, and we're talking about the initial consultation. It feels like yesterday we were talking about this year's, but we'll deal with that. I think this committee will want to obviously keep a close eye on that 303 in Amber 2, and I'm sure we'll do that in future meetings. But it's great that we've got nothing in red. So I think we need to congratulate officers for steering us through that. And I think again, looking at all the comments in here and the projections that we've got, and the early emergence of risks that we're tackling nice and early, I think again Hillingdon needs to be congratulated for sound financial management and doing everything it can to protect frontline core services. So we'll watch it with interest in the months ahead. But no, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Tugwell. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your time and report. When it comes to efficiency savings, the phrase kind of gives me jitters, because there has to be some challenges that come with efficiency savings. And if we are compromising somewhere, would you be able to tell us where? If not, how close we are to the brim? Is there room for more efficiency savings? Or how close we are to the brim of the efficiency savings? So say if we could make X amount of efficiency savings, are we here or where? And how concerned should we be? Because this term kind of makes me very cynical when it comes to efficiency savings. If you could help, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of where we are in terms of our efficiency scale, is the council at maximum efficiency or not? I don't think that's a question that can be answered based on a snapshot in time, because things are always moving forward, things are progressing, technology is improving, so we always strive to be as efficient as we can possibly be. We try to target those efficiencies and transformation work in back office functions to protect frontline services. So in terms of where we are today, we know that there's technology out there which can improve things. So, for example, the contact centre, we know that we can bring technology into that area, which helps to drive efficiency and reduce spend. But it also gives digital platforms to our residents, which many residents actually prefer, and they can use those systems to access council services and 24/7. Whilst also maintaining an element of the contact centre for people who don't want to use those electronic platforms. So whilst at the moment we're using that technology to drive efficiency, but where we're going to go in the future, it's hard to say. We're always keeping an eye out for new technologies and horizon scanning and ways to improve processes. So within finance, for example, we're currently looking at our financial systems that we're using, looking to drive efficiency in the finance processes in order to reduce spend and, again, protect those frontline services. But those efficiencies are due to the new technology, which takes a while to implement, and we do need to obviously make sure that our processes fit and it all works kind of cohesively as a piece, but it's not something that we could gauge on a scale, because it's just something that's always moving. Thank you.
If it's relevant and it's to this actual committee, yes.
I just so as you said, this is not affected, like nothing is affecting this committee in particular. But I just wanted to understand if there are pressures from rising population, does it not then affect the council housing stock, which kind of then fits in the remit of this committee? Is that not affected then, do you think? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So you are right that the housing and HRA is quite an interesting one. So housing itself and the kind of overarching strategy for the HRA sits within the Residents Select Committee, and then however the detailed kind of mechanics behind the capital programme, if you like, sits within the property element. So the council's HRA capital programme includes a target to build 100 new homes per year. Within that, we've also got other capital programmes such as the additional bedrooms programme and building extension. So we are looking to increase the housing stock in terms of absolute numbers, but also in terms of the number of bedrooms within the properties to ideally better suit the needs of the residents. We're always forward thinking around how that works and how that needs to fit together. So within the capital programme for the HRA, you will see us ramping up expenditure, which, because of the ring fence of the HRA, ultimately gets funded from the HRA rental income and service charges. So as we bring those properties on stream, we then get the rental income, and we have to do that in the context of the HRA 30-year plan and make sure everything's affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly, when I was an auditor 30-something years ago, when I first started in the NHS, before I moved on to what I do now, we often used the word efficiency savings, even back then. So it's something that they use within finance, and when they are looking, they put it down as efficiency savings. So don't get jittery. It's been around a long time. Any other questions or comments? Certainly it is Councillor Call.
It's just not the phrase of it, but the fact that something seems to have been compromised to reach there. So if we are using technology, we are reducing staff, so is the staff getting burnt out? So there has to be that element which I'm more worried about. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from. Certainly I'll pick up on what Councillor Tuckwell said. It's been tough for all authorities, I think, across the country. But within Hillingdon, we've certainly had very sound financial management over a number of years. And this just proves again, 23, 24, and we know that going into 24, 25, we can be confident that we're going to continue that process. So, well done to you guys for getting there and putting this together. And we look forward to, obviously, further reports coming back to us for our comment to go back to Cabinet, as we've already discussed. So the recommendation we have before us this evening is that the Property, Highways and Transport Select Committee notes the financial context in which the 24-25 budget setting process will take place in advance of detailed saving proposals being developed and approved at Cabinet in December 2023. Is that agreed? Great, thank you. And thank you, Andy, and thank you, Chris. We're obviously going to continue on with the meeting, but you are free to go if you wish to. Okay, thank you. Thanks to both of you and also your team. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, which is on agenda B. This is the Select Committee review, attaining best practice and value for the Council's highways resurfacing activities, which obviously was our review from last year. We've now got the draft report in front of us. Hopefully you've all had time to go through it. I've seen the summary of recommendations to Cabinet. I'm happy with those recommendations. At first I saw there was 9, but each one does stand alone and stand on its own. So before we move to what the recommendations are, has anybody got any comments on the report? Or any? Before we go to committee.
Okay, so as the Chairman's mentioned, we've come to the end of the Highways Resurfacing Review. The draft report's in front of you. I apologise for the lateness of the publishing of this report. I noted it was published yesterday. Hasn't given members a lot of time to consider the entire report, but the recommendations are based on those that were agreed by the committee at our July meeting. So tomorrow there is a site visit taking place. The committee aren't expected to come along, but it's for the Cabinet member to see the new reactive highways maintenance repair purchase that's noted in the report. We did, as a committee, have a site visit for the previous, the Rhino patch machines, which have now been replaced by these new road mender machines that operatives have been trained up. The Cabinet members going to have a site visit tomorrow, and potentially the committee are going to we're going to look for a date for a potential site visit in October if the committee have the appetite for it, to see the machines in action. Tonight, because of the members may not have had enough time to really consider the report, the recommendation is that the committee agree the report and the recommendations in principle and endorse its submission to Cabinet for due consideration, and that they delegate any drafting changes that might be required prior to the report submission to Cabinet to myself and the Chairman in consultation with the Labour lead. And then one thing to note on recommendation 2. So, on page 4, or any of the pages that list the recommendations, I've been speaking to Poonam, who was one of our key witnesses for the review, who's head of highways. Resulting from the session we had with Poonam, so this was, I think, November or maybe January of this year, quite a while ago, the highways have essentially put in process or adopted recommendation 2 in their processes whilst our review's been ongoing. So they've started to, in the prioritisation process for roads that would require resurfacing, They've given consideration and a weighting to the feedback from members' inquiries and resident service requests. So what I'm asking the committee tonight is if we can amend recommendation 2 to essentially endorse the principle of the recommendation, because it seems that the Highways Department have already taken this on board thanks to the review and thanks to members' feedback, and are enacting it already. But it is one of the key recommendations from the review, so I wouldn't necessarily want to remove it, but I would like to broadcast the fact that the review's already kind of gone some way to making change in the way that the Highways Department do things. So yeah, essentially with that recommendation 2, ensuring that Cabinet endorse the principle of recommendation 2. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. I'm happy with that amendment to that because it did come about from this committee's review in the first place. Councillor Money, you indicated.
Just that, thank you. It's a good report. Endorse all the recommendations, especially number 1, which I think is very important for residents and councillors alike during ward surgeries. But yeah, fully endorse this, and thanks for the officer time.
Any other comments? Thank you. It is a good report, Steve. Obviously, we would have probably had it earlier if there wasn't a certain thing that happened, as you know, that delayed other meetings and other writing of reports, a certain by-election. So, yeah, thank you, Steve. It's well constructed. The recommendations are as they are, as this group actually wanted, this committee, and I appreciate what you're saying. Yes, I think we just slightly amend that to endorse recommendation 2. With that, are we happy for this to go forward? And with the recommendations that if there are going to be any alterations, it's through myself and the Labour lead. Agreed? Thank you. Moving back now to Agenda A and Agenda Item 7. We have to look this year for obviously another review, and I had discussions, and you know that at the last meeting we did put together quite a list for Steve to take away and speak to officers about what would be feasible to get a good review in the time frame and to get outcomes that would benefit our residents and the council. In doing so, the one that came forward, and I've discussed this with Steve already, is the one we have before us at Agenda Item 7, which is a scrutiny review into Council's road safety initiatives and activities. And it does specifically mention as well around school areas. I'm sure as ward councillors, we all have at some point emails coming in about from residents the way the parents are parking, from the school themselves that they feel that it's not safe for their pupils, etc., etc. And I think this would be a very good review for us to undertake, not just from the point of my personal circumstances and my passion about road safety, but we do have some very good things going on within the borough. For example, I believe St Andrews, just across the roundabout here, I think they have some sort of walking bus, because obviously parents can't get anywhere near the school, the front of the school, because it's on the Uxbridge Road and it's a bus lane. And so I think they do go round the side road there and they actually walk the children through. So it'd be good to have perhaps the head teacher or whoever's in charge of their road safety there to come in and speak to us, and also to get some residents in to get their views on what happens at school time where you live. What are your concerns? And I don't know, Steve, in my times I know we used to have the junior road safety officers, JRSOs. If we still have those, then it would be good to understand that we still run that programme, or if we don't. Or if we do, maybe invite some of the JRSOs to come in. But certainly we've got a broad range of people we can invite in. We've got headmasters, principals, and we can invite from north and south. And if there's particular schools you know within your wards where you've had particular issues, well, let's invite in the head teacher and say, well, what are your views then? What issues do you have? or if you've got residents that are saying, well, they park across my drive, this happens at school time, you know, I see the parents just kick the child out in the morning and let them run across the road. This would be a good review, I think, for us to undertake and feed back in. Because I think at the end of the day, I know I'm over-passionate about road safety, but I think we all have that road safety element within us anyway. For the young as well as the elderly, to be honest. If you've got elderly trying to cross near schools sometimes when children are coming out, you've got no chance at some of the schools. So I'm hoping that you agree with me, and after I had the discussion with Steve, and this is a review that you feel that we can take forward as a committee. So I'll open it up for your comments. Councillor Tugwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we did debate this quite some length back in July, which seems like an age ago now. But I think reading the review objectives, I think there's a great bit of work that we can do on this, because as you say, Mr. Chairman, I think all of us as ward councillors have got one or two examples of hot spots where there's a tension between the school, the parents and road safety, and I think we can do a lot of good by finding some new methods, drawing on some good practices you've quite rightly said, and bringing in, you know, how people are experiencing and living with you know, these road safety issues, particularly around schools. And I think we've got the makings of a really good review that can make a big difference to the residents and schools in the London Borough of Hillingdon. So I fully endorse taking this review forward.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I completely agree. The only suggestion I would have is, could we invite the parking enforcement team in as well? I think that would be really beneficial, just to see their stance, because I understand they are stretched, of course, and there's so many schools within our borough, but that element there could be quite effective for us to look at what action they can take as well.
Thank you. Councillor Garlick, or
just having a question about the school street scheme. I'm aware that there's one school in Hillingdon that has the scheme for some time, and the council was looking at the other possible sites. Did we have any communications from other schools who might be willing to participate in the scheme?
I don't know. I think that will come out during the officer witness sessions. They would be the questions we can ask the officers. We can say, look, you know, what other schools have come forward? Are they feasible? Can we do that within that area? Because obviously it's got to be feasible to actually do it, to actually run safely. So that would certainly be something that we'd be looking at as well, most definitely. Councillor Money.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I endorse it. I've got five schools in my little ward, so definitely endorse it. Very important. Raised number of inquiries on this, and brought it up with you previously as well. But I think I think what we decided at the last meeting was that we'd have a few mini reviews almost, just to touch up on the other important subjects, because road safety, again, I endorse it, but bus routes is quite important at the moment as well, with ULEZ coming in, and then when Heathrow Village is just stranded with no bus route going from one village to the next. Residents in certain villages can't visit, you know, GPs and pharmacies. So I think that's, if we can have some kind of standalone for that, and the same goes for the housing maintenance and refurbishment as well. Again, another important aspect. But I think if we can have something into bus routes as maybe a mini review, that would also be beneficial.
Yes, so just to touch on the comments that were made at the last meeting, because the committee unanimously agreed that they would like to hold a number of simultaneous smaller scale reviews. It's noted in the report that in terms of the committee's resources, it wouldn't be possible to hold concurrent reviews, but if we can stagger them so that we are essentially knocking out smaller scale reviews back to back, then that would be a more efficient use of the committee's resources. So with that in mind, the scoping report that's been prepared, if the committee, currently there's 3 witness sessions in there as a kind of draft schedule for the review. If the committee are looking to do smaller scale reviews and get more done in the year in terms of deep dives into topics, then it may be that we lose one of those witness sessions. That would shorten the review, and then we can go into those other topics that the committee had suggested. On the bus routes suggestion, I had a word with officers regarding that, and in terms of an information item we can bring to the committee, it wouldn't necessarily be an appropriate area for the committee to review because there's minimal powers that the council has. It's more in terms of when TfL approach us about their bus routes and what they do, that goes immediately to the Cabinet Member of Property, Highways and Transport. So I'm looking to get a representative from TfL to come into the committee and for the committee to really kind of grill down on TfL regarding those bus routes, because I know there are particular concerns in the south of the borough regarding the routing of buses. So that one topic would not necessarily be feasible for a review of the committee due to the council's kind of lack of immediate direct power on that. But in terms of holding small scale reviews, if the committee are keen to do that, then we can shorten this road safety review and start to stack them essentially and go one onto the next.
I'll just take Councillor Call first for a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a brilliant major review. The only thing I would say is, because we were mentioning the residents around the school, if we could have a witness session around them as well, because I can't see where it says the residents along as well. On page 23, we have different witness sessions, but none from the residents around the school. Okay, it's page 23 for me.
Yeah, potential witnesses, Hillingdon residents, representatives from other local authorities, Hillingdon schools, including parents and or school leaders, definitely from the officers. We've all got on page 22, potential witnesses.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not listed on the days in the column or...
No, but the TBC would be those that are to be confirmed.
Okay.
We've named the LBH officers and representatives of borough schools, but we've also got TBC, so that would be,
For the
is it going to be residents, is it going to be a JRSO group or whatever?
Yeah, residents' input, I think, Chair, you would agree, would be very important as well. Thank you.
So picking up on what Steve said about the bus routes just coming to us as like a briefing session, he's quite right. When I was Cabinet Member, the number of meetings I had with TfL in this building about bus routes, and we're still talking now, even now, about bus routes, because they do come in, they listen to you, and you explain everything, but then, of course, what they do, well, is there enough footfall? Are we going to make money out of it? And then you get, well, there's not enough footfall for that, so we're moving this to there. So if we're going to have a briefing session on that, that would probably be more beneficial than a review, because even if we'd done a review and fed it into Cabinet, there's not a lot Cabinet could do. So all we would be doing is recommending to Cabinet that they write to TfL to say X, Y, Z. And I know that the current Cabinet Member has various meetings with TfL on and off as well. As for the housing, we generally get a briefing on the where we are with housing, don't we, Steve? I'm just looking very quickly at the last...
So on housing, we've now got a new annual item. I think if we just quickly move it forward to the committee's work programme, in the annual items you've got the building safety strategy, which incorporates a lot of that repairs and maintenance aspect that the committee were looking to look at. So that is now a standing item that the committee receives every year, usually in the springtime. It's down for March next year at the moment. But yeah, a keen area that the committee feel that they should be keeping an eye on.
And I think, if I'm not wrong, that came from when we had the other briefing session and we said we wanted to keep that as a standing item. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So, moving forward, are we happy for this to be our scrutiny review? And obviously, we will look at our first meeting, the witnesses to be at the first meeting to kick it off in October. Obviously, we're agreeing scoping this evening. But in October, the first witness session will be our own officers, that we understand where we are currently as a council, which will then give us, as a committee, an idea of where we think the vision should be going, and that's where you bring up about the various systems you want to speak about, Councillor Garlick, when we've got the officers here in that first session, and then we can discuss and move forward from that as well. So we agreed with the recommendation that Property, Highways and Transport Select Committee comment on, amend and agree the scoping report to initiate a review into road safety. So we're happy for that to move forward as our review. Agree? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, the Cabinet Forward Plan. Hopefully you've all had enough time to look at this. As I said, everything was in public domain. I've just noticed, and I actually circled these, that there are some reports that are private for obvious reasons at current time. But I don't think we've got obviously we got the LIP submission, which is Cabinet Thursday. It's going 12th of October. So that's our submission as council for monies to Transport for London. We put it forward last year. We got part of it, obviously, like a lot of councils, didn't get everything they were asking for. But that will come to us. We can have a look at that and discussion on that. Apart from that, that's probably the most exciting thing on there. Steve?
So one thing I noticed on the forward plan, the Cabinet Forward Plan, that could be a useful item to come to the committee is it's down for November as a Cabinet member decision, so not going to Cabinet but going to one of the Cabinet members, and it's the Hillingdon cycling strategy. So this is in draft at the moment, and it's the first of its kind in the Borough, and if members are agreed, I think it would be a useful thing to come in front of the committee in its draft form, seeing as it's a perfect strategy for the committee to kind of give their comments on before it's actually agreed by the Cabinet members. So if the committee are happy to, then I can add that to the work programme.
I'm happy to have that on there. Anybody else? Councillor Stockwell?
No, I think that's a good shout by Steve there, and I'd be happy to have that come in front of us for some scrutiny.
Interested to see where we're going to go with the cycling strategy. Obviously, we're meant to be getting greener and leaner. So there we go. Any other comments? We happy with what's before us on the forward plan? Okay. Moving on to item 9, which is our work programme. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 18th of October. And at that meeting, we will have, obviously, the evidence gathering from officers for our review. I'm just trying to track this across. We've also got the forward plan monitoring, preservation maintenance of our heritage assets. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's coming to us. There's a one-off item, which would be interesting. So that would be. We'll have the cycling strategy then as well, yeah, which we've just added. Yeah. So that would be a good meeting to get that. But it would be our evidence gathering, and then obviously at that meeting, that's when we start to decide. Okay, at the next meeting for our review, what witnesses do we want to come into that? And that will be based basically on what the officers have told us where we are currently with our road safety plans, etc. So the recommendation is that the Property, Highways and Transport Select Committee considers the work programme and agrees any amendments. Anybody have any amendments? Or we have the only amendment, obviously, is the cycle one. Councillor Money?
Bring this up, but do you think we should also have a one-off on the update on the Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre? there's a lot of residents that are raising concerns in my ward as well as West Drayton and Useley. Just on the update and how work's
Steve,
going to progress.
This is on the agenda at the council, isn't it? Is there something at the council?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I may have to go away and confirm that if there is something on the council agenda. I know that was published today. So may need to double check that.
It is actually on there. It's been confirmed by my two colleagues to the right.
Right, okay.
So there will be something at the council meeting where it will be discussed, and I would imagine that details will come out at that council meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
And we've agreed the work programme moving forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your input as usual. And see you again in October. And with that, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.